If you're like me and you already have all of the available fighters, it's time to check out some custom fighters. Today we have Professor X and Cyclops from the X-Men. And here they are. We have Professor X and Cyclops. So these guys are a dual hero, kind of like Cloak and Dagger. And speaking of which, let's quickly bring them in so we can compare what these miniatures here look like compared to the actual miniatures. And once again, completely knocked out of the park. These guys are from the Meeple Smith. I will see a day that I don't have a Meeple Smith miniature in one of these videos. But these miniatures are just absolutely fantastic as always. This Professor X one actually is probably to me one of the most impressive. Just looking underneath the wheelchair and through the wheels and like under his arm, this guy is just flawless. He looks amazing. And we can also look at Cyclops real fast here. He's a lot more brooding. We can compare him to Cloak here. Once again, bases are the exact same size and width. Bottoms just look a little bit different, but not a big deal. And then proportional wise, he's definitely a big muscly boy, but proportions look perfect. And I always say if you just add a little bit of a dark wash to these guys, they'll look exactly like they are from the game. So before I move on to the deck, let's quickly look at their health dials here. These are some that I'm pretty proud of. I love the way they came out. Super easy to tell who's Cyclops, who's Professor X here. Backs will look the exact same as the front, just missing the names there. And then also the cutouts look pretty good. And of course, they're completely functional, just like the actual game. We can actually quickly compare their health dials to an official Unmatched one here. And this is Dagger's. Just slightly smaller. These are the miniature health dials that are used for the dual heroes. So the actual ones are a little bit bigger, but once again, these guys fit in just perfectly in gameplay. Okay, so let's take a look at their hero card here. We have Professor X, a ranged hero with 9 health, and then Cyclops, another hero, not a sidekick as it says there, another ranged hero with 10 health. And what I mean by them both being heroes is that you have to kill both of them to win. They're just 2 heroes that one player controls instead of a hero and a sidekick, just like Cloak and Dagger. So they have a move of 2, and this is their special ability. It says, for an action, Professor X may choose an opponent and look at a random card from their hand. If you do, draw a card. So it's basically Professor X reading your opponent's mind, kind of figuring out what they have planned coming up. And just like maneuvering, you get to draw a card. So it's almost like a maneuver action, but instead of moving, you just peek at a card. So pretty thematic to him and definitely helpful for his deck. And they also have an extra rules card here, but we're going to skip it for now because it kind of pertains to some cards in the deck. So let's look at their deck first. So here we have the Professor X and Cyclops deck card back. I believe the one that the creator made is just the picture here, the icon with a black background. I just added that border and the names down there to definitely make it look more like it's from Unmatched. So I'll leave that in the description so you can download it if you would like it. And this is just the logo for Xavier's School for the Gifted Youngsters from all the X-Men movies and the comics. So yeah, let's take a look at the deck. So starting off with Professor X here, this is an attack of 2 with a boost of 1, and he has 2 copies. And this is Mental Blast. After combat, if you win the combat, deal 8 damage to the opposing fighter. So we're actually pretty familiar with a card like this. Medusa has the exact same text there. So if you can catch him with either a 1 or not even defending, then you get to deal a butt ton of damage. So he's definitely a scary character if you get attacked by him. But if you'll notice, that is the only attacks he has. So if he is attacking you, it's most likely he's gonna be doing something like this. So you wanna, definitely defend with at least a 2. And then moving on from his attacks there, these are Professor X's defense cards. It's a defense of 0, boost of 1 with 2 copies. And this is Calm Yourself. Immediately cancel all effects on your opponent's card and ignore their card value. So basically he's just mind controlling them to not attack him anymore. So pretty good. And since you are defending, you go first. So you're just canceling everything on their card. And he has 2 of those, and they're the only defense cards that Professor X has. And then moving on, he does not have any versatiles that are specific to him. So these are his schemes for Professor X. This is 1 copy, and this is Psychic Shockwave. Deal 2 damage to all enemy fighters in Professor X's zone. So this kind of reminds me of the scene in Logan where he's in the the hotel there, and he is just shocking everybody with his mind. But he only has one of those copies, so definitely good to against like Squirrel Girl or somebody with a bunch of sidekicks and just knock them all out in one card. But once again, only one copy. And then his next scheme here is Cerebro, and this is a boost of 2 copies, and it's all opponents reveal their hands. So once again, just on theme with Professor X, you're just going to look at all the cards in your opponent's hands. So even if you're playing with multiple opponents. And so 2 copies of those. And then, so here's where the main part of Professor X's deck comes in. This is Mind Control. He has 5 copies of this, a scheme for a boost of 4. So he has a bunch of these, and basically what he's going to do is, well, oh, I don't know why I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just read what it does here. It says, choose a fighter, draw up to 3 cards from that fighter's desk. Their normal hand limits apply. You may now control that fighter until they lose a combat. Professor X takes damage, or you end the mind control. So this is a little bit confusing when you first read it, but basically when you play this card, you choose an opponent, you draw 3 cards from their deck, you add it to your hand. Once again, you can't go above 7 cards. So at the end of your turn, you have to discard back down to 7. But now you may play those cards and maneuver that player. They don't lose control of that fighter. On their turn, they still get to control him. But on your turn, you also get to control their fighter. So let's quickly put this deck down and look at the extra rules here. So this says, when mind controlling another fighter, you may not draw cards from their deck. Instead of discarding their cards, they go to the bottom of the fighter's deck. So if their cards would have any effects, or even their special hero ability, you could use that as well. If that allows you to draw a card, you don't draw it from their deck. You don't draw any cards. I guess you can also home rule it that you draw cards. You can draw cards from your deck, but that's kind of, I guess, up to you. Usually we don't do it. He's already kind of a little bit on the more powerful side, so we'll just say you don't get to draw cards. Instead of discarding their cards, they go at the bottom of their deck. So once again, if you would be discarding a card that you stole from them, you would put it on the bottom of the deck instead of in your discard. So basically every time you play a card from them, it's like you're playing as them, so you'll put it in their discard just as if you had played it. So you can't like use their cards to boost and throw them away. The next says, if the controlled fighter loses a combat or Professor X takes damage, shuffle the remaining cards back into their deck and end the mind control. So if you're attacking with their player and you lose, then you would just take all the cards that you had taken from their deck that were in your hand and put it back in their deck and shuffle the deck. Or if Professor X gets hurt at all, so even if you cause it. So I do want to quickly pause again and just kind of explain it a little bit. So these guys are definitely more that you would be playing with like a 2v2, because you would mind control one of your opponents and make them attack the other opponent. It's not super powerful if you can mind control their player and attack yourself. You could take their cards, attack yourself, and then defend with yourself. Not super helpful, but still something you can do. Definitely, I said, more of a 2v2 player because you want to mind control one opponent and attack the other opponent. But still works 1v1, just not as helpful in the mind controls. So you can definitely use their cards to play them in times that would not be helpful, if that makes sense. Then lastly on here, it says, both enemy and ally cards effects will apply to a mind-controlled fighter. So it's just saying that if you play a card from your hand and it says enemy or ally, they both apply to the mind control. So if it says like heal all allies for 1, you would heal your opponent, or if it says deal 1 damage to all enemies, you still attack the opponent because it's still your enemy. And then on the other side here, it says Professor X and Cyclops are both heroes and must both be defeated. Just kind of explaining, what I did before where they're a dual hero. And then it says Professor X cannot move, attack, or defend while he is mind controlling another fighter. You may use the borrowed cards, but they must be used correctly, as in they must be used for the fighter that they're intended for. So one big caveat here, it does say you cannot attack, defend, move, attack, or defend while mind controlling. So whenever Professor X has cards in his hand from another opponent's deck, let's say you're doing a 2v2 situation, you mind control number 1, on those 2 turns, they can attack Professor X for free because he cannot defend while mind controlling. So it's a very scary thing, but also kind of explains what you can do in those situations. It says you may stop controlling them at any time by shuffling his borrowed cards back into the opponent's deck, and the mind control when you run out of enemy cards. So once again, the mind control ends if you play all 3 of the cards that you took by mind controlling, or if you take damage, or you can just decide to end at any time. Once again, not super helpful in the explanation here, but we kind of had the home rule that if someone's attacking Professor X, you can stop the mind control and then defend. Like, you can choose to do it in between an attack. But that can be more of a home rule for you if you feel like he's more or less powerful in your games. But yeah, very interesting mechanic, as you can tell. Not super easy to explain, but definitely works in gameplay. It's just kind of something you have to play with. So let's keep looking at the deck here. So that's all 5 of his mind controls, and that's the end of the Professor X specific cards. So now moving on to our other hero, Cyclops. And I do want to once again point out that with the dual hero, it's kind of scary because all of these cards here are Professor X only, so Cyclops cannot use them. So you might be unlucky and just keep drawing, Professor X cards, and you're kind of screwed. So that's where kind of the mind control thing can come in, and you can mind control an opponent. Once again, in a 1v1 situation, not always the best because you mind control him, and then you have to attack yourself. But I guess you could kind of use his schemes and stuff from his hand just to, ruin his deck. But up to your gameplay style. So here we have a Cyclops attack card for 3, a boost of 1, and 2 copies. This is Focused Beam. After attack, if you won the combat, your opponent discards a random card. Not too much to say there, just kind of a fun card. I do want to point out, you'll see kind of with the Cyclops cards here, I think they got most of the artwork for Professor X from either comic books or just art illustrations. But some of the Cyclops ones here look like they took pictures of an action figure. This one I can't tell if it's from a piece of artwork or if that's an action figure they just kind of, cartoonized, but you'll kind of see in the next ones here. So that's his only 2 attack cards. And then we have defense cards for Cyclops here. A 3 defense, 2 boost, 3 copies, return fire. If you lost the combat, deal 1 damage to the opposing fighter. So you'll kind of see a recurring thing here. Professor X is all about looking at your opponent, seeing what he has up next, and even mind controlling them. And Cyclops is all about dealing lots of damage, even when he's defending. And then we have Cyclops again, got you covered, a versatile for 2, boost 1, 3 copies. And it says, I don't know if I said it, got you covered. Immediately, if a Professor X is in Cyclops' zone, the value of this card is 4 instead. So incentivizing you to keep them together. And then a versatile for Cyclops again, a 1 value with 2 boost, 4 copies. During combat, you may boost this card. So he has 4 of these, and he is very interesting because if you've noticed back here in Professor X's cards here, all of his mind controls are boosts of 4. So this can be a 5 4 times. So he can definitely be very strong. So it's a very interesting deck of, if I'm doing a 1v1, usually Cyclops is kind of my main character, and Professor X is just kind of there to help him out. And a 2v2 is almost the opposite, where Professor X is doing a bunch of big, impactful things, and Cyclops is defending him, make sure he doesn't take any damage. So a very cool, interesting character where he changes depending on your, what game style you're playing. So move on from those. These are any cards. These are versatile of 1 with a boost of 1 and 3 copies. A regroup. We already all know this card, but I'll read it anyways. After combat, draw 1 card. If you won the combat, draw 2 cards instead. And then here we go. You can see that these are just 2 pictures of action figures that are kind of put through a filter. So versatile of 2, boost of 1, 3 copies, faint. We all know this card as well. So yeah, so that is our heroes here. Let's see what my final thoughts are. Okay, so my final thoughts on these are kind of already been said. I kind of just kept throwing them in as we were talking about the deck there. But these guys are just really cool fighters. Obviously with these custom fighters, we're not looking for the most balanced or the most easy to play. We're looking for very fun additions with fun characters. I think these guys really fit those roles. I love how the 1v1 situation puts the focus more on Cyclops as the hero, with Professor X being support. And then if you play 2v2, he's the main, with honestly even your teammate and Cyclops being the support for him to make sure he stays alive. The 9 and 10 health points here, I think definitely really help. Him only being at 9, and if he's mind controlling and someone just runs up and, throws a punch at him, he's going to take most of that damage, or they're going to have to end the mind control. So the mind control is very interesting, but it always ends super easy. So honestly, at the end of the day, I definitely, of course, recommend these guys. They're very fun fighters. So if you guys want to get these fighters for yourselves, the miniatures here I got from the Meeplesmith, the meeplesmith.com. So you can get them there. If you want the health dials, these are the 2-inch cardboard punch outs that you can get on makeboardgames.com. Almost always forget that URL. And then you get those, you just cut out this little slit there so you can see the numbers behind, and then you punch out the middle. And these plastic bits are actually just the extra ones from Unmatched. I don't know where to get replacements of these, but I'll let you know if I ever find out. And then the artwork I used for the health dials, I will leave in the description, so you can just drag and drop and they'll be ready to go. And then the deck here, the actual artworks, and text for the art will be on unmatched.decks. And here is our creator, the Real Ninja Tree. He actually also made the TMNT deck, so I definitely love his decks. There's a couple more that I want to do in the future. The only few additions that I made to his deck is I did change the card back, so I will leave that in the description. If you want to get these cards actually printed out, same place you'll get the cardboard punch outs at the makeboardgames.com. I'll leave a link to the exact texture and everything that I used to get these perfect. And then the only other thing I did change is I believe his original color here was like a gray or a purple or something like that. And I really liked the yellow base with Professor X here, so I just changed this color to yellow. So I will also leave that image in the description, but it's just more aesthetics than anything else. So anyways, I gotta go. My toast is burning.